Right now on the line with us is our old buddy Charles Sauer, the libertarian economist and president of the Market Institute, the author of the book Profit Motive, What Drives the Things We Do. MarketInstitute.org is the website. His Twitter handle, Charles Sauer, S-A-U-E-R. And Charles, I wanted to get you on because this big story right now is these kind of dueling infrastructure bills, the $3.5 trillion one the Democrats are trying to put together through reconciliation, the one that has about $500 billion worth of new spending. They call it the $1 trillion one that the so-called problem solver Democrats and Republicans have gotten together on. And because so much of the Republican Party, particularly the intransigent faction, essentially, people like Rand Paul, consider themselves libertarians, and you're a libertarian scholar, I wanted to get the libertarian take on infrastructure in America. What are your thoughts on all this?
Well, first off, I think that there's multiple ways to talk about this. I don't think that Rand Paul is necessarily against infrastructure or the government involvement in infrastructure. And I've read literature that proposes the government not being involved in infrastructure or roads at all. And I would encourage everybody to read that. I would encourage everybody to read literature on all sides of all issues. That isn't the one that won me out. It's not the theory that is. In fact, one of the ex-heads of the Cato Institute wrote one of the better papers in this that shows that it's actually way more efficient for the government to build roads. I think where Rand Paul sits is when you look at any of these solutions, they're dealing with stuff way outside of just funding roads and even electrical grids, and they're providing these nuclear power plants.
Charles, your phone is fading in and out. The story that I've heard from not just Ron Paul but so many libertarians is that everything, including infrastructure, should be left to the private sector. That if you're going to have roads, they should be toll roads. If you're going to have, fill in the blank. If you're going to have water supplies, somebody should be able to make a buck off it.
There's been arguments that have been made for that, but I think the predominant literature says that the government is better at running those. But we have seen productive and effective private toll roads being added in a lot of cities, including some of the cities that are working, and they help for both sides. They help people that can afford it to get out of the traffic, and the people that can't afford it have less traffic because of that. So we've seen private roads work, but if we privatize the whole infrastructure, it's not as effective or efficient for the market. And so the government is actually better at doing that. And most of the literature says that.
Charles?
Mr. Paul, he would likely agree with that.
Yeah, you keep fading out here. So we have physical infrastructure, roads, bridges, rail, airports, all this kind of stuff. Apparently you have no problem with the federal government being involved in that. Doesn't that disqualify you as a libertarian?
No, again, one of the past heads of the Cato Institute, one of the top libertarian think tanks, Bill Niskanen, agrees with me on that. Mm-hmm. The government has a role. It's just that the government doesn't have a role in everything that we do. It needs to be limited in that role.
So what about our human infrastructure? What about our educational system, for example? What I've been hearing from libertarians for years is that, we shouldn't have public schools. Everything should be private. Everything should be local. Everything should be, funded by, whatever. People should have skin in the game. Where are you at with this?
Well, we have a public school system, and there's nobody that can tell me that the public school system is winning right now. The places where our school system is doing good is where people have a choice to exit that system. If you look into Washington, D.C., there was an uproar when they tried to cancel the ability for parents to actually get into charter schools. that isn't like in Texas or someplace. This is a liberal bastion where people were fighting to get into charter schools, and that's because the public school system is so bad. So
I think that's a function of the property tax, Charles. This is, I mean, you know, we decided back in the 1890s when public schools in the United States really became a thing that they would be funded by property taxes specifically, and you can go back and read this all started in Boston. And the WASPs who were running Boston, at that time, the really poor people, the ghettos in Boston were Catholic, Irish Catholic. And they did not want those people to have good schools. The WASPs didn't. They want, and so they said, you know, the poor communities are going to have crappy schools because they're going to be funded by property taxes, and the wealthy communities are going to have great schools. And that's what you're describing in Washington, D.C. It's what we're describing all over the country. Why don't we just nationalize our schools like every other developed country in the world does, or pretty much every other one?
That's an interesting way to put fear into people's minds that racism is dominating the country. But the statistics don't. But the statistics don't follow that, Tom. If you look in Kansas City, there was more money spent per student on students in the city when Manuel Cleaver was leading the city than in the suburbs where I grew up.
Yeah, but in some cases, or in many cases, Charles, if you're coming into a school district that historically had been segregated, legally had been segregated prior to the 60s, then you've got massive problems with your physical infrastructure. You've got multi-generational problems with your educational infrastructure. There's a lot of catch-up to do. So, yeah, it costs more for maybe a generation or two. That doesn't mean that you're not, you know, you shouldn't be doing it. You shouldn't be bringing schools up to the standards of everybody else. And then on top of that, it's compounded by the fact that, again, they're still funded by property taxes.
All right. Again, you're still not working with the actual numbers, because now if we move over to Denmark, which has these things that you call for, the actual school system doesn't create equality. It doesn't do the things that you're wanting. And that's because there are different parts in society that we need to address first. Look, I've been fighting this inside the conservative movement about marijuana laws. People are scared about marijuana laws. And I've pointed out there's bigger things on our list about focusing on education, focusing on family and house lives, and correct policing. If we look at the educational system, and we can see in Denmark that the government system doesn't close the gaps, we need to look at other ways to do it, and that might be privatized. The left just at least needs to open
you're
up
trying
their
to deal
minds
with
to this.
Poverty with privatizing schools. It seems like a mess to me. Anyhow, Charles, it's always nice to touch base with you, and thanks for bringing me up to date on your thinking on these issues. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Charles Sauer, his book, Profit Motive, What Drives the Things We Do. MarketInstitute.org is his website, and you can tweet him at Charles Sauer, S-A-U-E-R. We'll be right back. Viktor Orban, I got to tell you about him.